Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain. Today we just wanted to do a quick video and showing how we're putting together kind of a homemade composting system. Because as we talked about earlier, the last video we did on buckwheat, that we were trying to move away from purchasing urban waste compost or commercially made compost and make enough for our own systems in our garden. And this is kind of what we used to do years ago before we found a good source of urban waste compost. Is we had a series of small, just very easily made bins, wire round bins that we put our yard waste in, or leaves, or basically anything that was biomass on around the garden area. And at that time we were running much smaller bins. They were maybe 3 foot in diameter, a little more than 3 foot in diameter, and about 4 foot in height. And it didn't produce a whole lot of compost, but it produced enough for just basically some potting soil mix and maybe adding a little bit to some of our boxes. So now that we're moving to trying to get rid of the urban waste compost, we were using urban waste compost about 20 yards a year to take care of our garden area and some of the things with our tunnels, plus flower boxes and things that around the property. And particularly with the gardening, we were using a deep mulch system, very similar to what Charles Dowding has kind of developed over the years. And you can find a lot of information on deep mulch, no-dig gardening type stuff. If you just do a search on the YouTube, you'll find that there's no-till growers and Charles Dowding and a whole bunch of other people that are kind of doing the similar thing. So what we're going to be doing is kind of revamping and bringing our composting system up to speed. We need to get, at least to take care of our immediate zone around our house with our flower boxes and our vegetables, we need to produce about 5 to 6 yards a year just for that. The tunnels, that's going to be a different issue. We're going to have to work out a different system for those guys. But we think that we have enough biomass just in the general area produced every year between leaves and all kinds of things that are growing around the area to make enough biomass to fill each one of these bins. Now, these bins, this is just 2 by 4 inch mesh wire, fence wire. It's the diameter of each of these bins is about 5 feet, and its height is 4 foot. So it'll hold approximately, if you do the old math with the circumference to diameter ratio and all that, you'll figure out that it holds about 81 cubic feet, which is approximately 3 yards of gross material before things rot down. One of the things about composting is there's all kinds of different ways for making it super fast. People make a pile that's only maybe 2 to 3 feet high, turn it, make sure it has a pretty high or at least a balanced ratio of carbon to nitrogen. And if you turn it every other day, you could probably make your compost in about 18 days. We're not that energetic. What we're going for here is kind of like a one-turn system. And that we got this idea. Charles Dowding, again, I kind of go back to him because he's really worked the bugs out of a system like this. And it's kind of the point that he'll take several weeks to fill a bin, and his bin systems are roughly 6 foot by 6 by 4 foot. And so this is kind of a similar idea. You fill the bins over several weeks, and then they rot down for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how temperatures go. And when the temperature of your pile gets down and the volume starts to decrease to a level, you do it one turn. So what we're doing is we're creating equivalent bins that are the same size, basically in a series. Now you can see we got one here that we just filled about 2 weeks ago that is already dropped. It was filled up to the top. It's already dropped down about 6 inches. And this bin is temperature at the core of it is about 140. It's ranging between 145 and 150 degrees. And then when you get out to the outside, I mean, I put my hand on it, I can feel the heat on it, and today is maybe 60 degrees and it feels like it's about 80 degrees, and I've done the temperature test 4 inches in from the edge and it's running at about 80. So that's kind of the gradient. We got a good cooking going on here, and as we build these bins you can see that there's different layers. There's a brown layer, there's a green layer. You know, we throw some old compost from another bin just as inoculation on a very thin layer in. But it's the same idea as we're building, you know, a couple inch layer of green, couple inch layer of brown. And the key to us for this time of year in our dry season is we have to make sure that we keep moisture on these piles because they will dry out. We have a lot of drying winds, and we're just now starting to approach what would be our cooling down season. Then we'll start getting in moisture on a more regular basis. You'll notice too that we don't have any kind of roofing system over this. And what we're going to be doing is, once we get into more regular rain, is we'll be using some of our old metal hoops from our low tunnels, and we'll make a basically dome structure that will wrap a plastic tarp around the top and just tie it off so to keep the rain from saturating it. If the rain hits the side, it's not that big of a deal because it's not going to go in that far. So this bin right here was finished on August 20th, and today is September 30th. So we've got roughly 6 weeks on this, and it was at the time when we stopped filling, we were a couple inches above this guy, so it's already dropped. Each one of these is 4 inches, so it's already dropped 4 times 4, 16 plus a couple, so it's probably already dropped 18 inches, almost a foot and a half. When it fired up, its temperature at the core got as hot as we were approaching 160, which is a little bit on the high side for us. We want to kind of keep it in a zone when it, you know, in its initial cooking phase of about probably somewhere 140, 150 is better, I think, in terms of it not burning too fast. And it was the same thing. And basically, when it hit its peak, you know, what we had is when you went a couple inches in from the outside, we were actually closer to 90 degrees. So you're getting a variation of different kinds of biologic activity happening. And you can see it's consuming the volume of this, and this pile stayed at 150 degrees. Like I said, it fired up in about 3 days. Stayed at about 150 to 160 degrees for almost 3 weeks without any turning. We did not turn anything. We haven't brought anything up or made any kind of changes to it. Just the pile is just working its way down. And as I said, today we are at 6 weeks, and the center of the pile is still 120 degrees. So it's still cooking.
How do you measure the temperature?
We've got a compost thermometer, and I recommend, you know, if you're doing your own compost, it's a good idea to get one of these guys. And you can kind of see that it's got a nice gauge on it. This one's in Fahrenheit, but you can get them Fahrenheit centigrade or centigrade only. And this was 120 degrees at the center of the pile. So there's still plenty of oxygen in it. And the material that we put in our bins, we don't shred it. Now you could, that's the other thing, if you want to make this thing go faster, run it through a shredder. The smaller the pieces, you know, the more you can turn it, the faster it'll go. But our objective is not to worry about that because we're getting a variation of different kinds of decomposition processes going on, you know, as this pile reduces down. When this pile, in the center of the pile, gets about 85 to 90 degrees, and that's probably going to be happening over the course of the next several weeks. I'm looking at sometime towards October 20th, about another 3 weeks. This pile will probably have dropped, so as we can see, we already dropped 4. We're working on dropping another level 5. It's probably going to be half as big as when we filled it. And that's about the point. What we'll do is we'll turn it in to our next bin, which is actually currently under construction right over here.
How did you start with that one?
Well, this one was here.
No, the new one.
How did we start it?
Yeah, I mean, you were telling me you had to do some work to get
to
it.
Yeah, well, we had to do a little excavation because we are on a hill. And so what we did is, and we had some drainage issues. We had a drainage line that had to relocate. That was off our cooler, the gutters from that. And then I had to build a little rock wall to kind of give it a step down to get it to level. So the idea is, instead of having something that's on a hill, you know, kind of going like this, we wanted to make sure that it was level going into it. So we had to actually drop it down about 8 inches at the high point and then backfill at the low point to get it to level out.
This is also along our ditch.
Yeah, there is a drainage ditch around here. When we get to peak rainwater, if we have a big storm, we can get some water flow coming down this way. Although, you know, it's
not recently.
Yeah, it really hasn't been. I mean, maybe once out of every 5 years we'll get a storm systems, a set of storm systems that'll come through at a time when the ground's really saturated, and we'll get, you know, and maybe the water will rise up. But it's never, this is kind of at the top of our hill, so the amount of water running through this section really isn't as great as it is further down.
But you wouldn't want water running under your compost pile, would you?
No, and it won't either, basically. I mean, this area has always been, you know, pretty good, because like I said, we're near the top of our ridge is just like 40 feet away up the road. And so we're just like 40 feet off the top of the ridge. So there isn't a lot of rain. So, and the ridge would make the water go one way or the other way. And so it hasn't had a chance to accumulate, you know, and gather any velocity or height or anything like that. So we've never had an issue here. Now, building this is a very simple design. Again, I talked about the fencing wire. We went with a narrower mesh to make certain that we keep material in. And the diameter of the piles is 5 foot. We're just using simple fencing T-posts. These were used ones we had on the property, so we're not buying anything new, nothing. This is all kind of a recycled idea here. And what you may notice and go, well, your wire doesn't go all the way around. And actually what I've got is I got 2 more posts to put in right here at the edge on each side. And then we've designed this thing to be basically a wire gate. The way you would kind of look at it is this is cut into 2 segments. It's approximately, it's about 16, 17 of these 2-inch segments. So it's it's a little less than 3 feet on each of these segments. And they're pinned together basically using a fence rod to keep it together. Now, if I pull this fence rod out, then these 2 pieces basically come apart, and they're wired such over here against the post that this will actually swing open like a gate. So it's not a permanent round all the way around that you can't get into. So when you're ready to turn it, you can pull this rod, and then each segment here in the front will turn back to the post, and basically you'll be open almost, 4 feet across to get into the pile and do all your kind of digging that you want to do. When I'm filling, it's not that big of a deal. It's closed up, and it's just basically really easy just to throw things into the pile and move them around. So once this is finished near the last couple of weeks in October, we'll be turning it into that bin over there, and we'll make certain that the material that's on the outside is moved to the inside. We'll adjust for moisture, add more water if we need to, and then at that point, that's only going to fill that bin about halfway. So then when this bin here is finished and is down halfway, which will be approximately probably sometime around Thanksgiving, this bin's material will be moved into that bin, and those materials will sit there from November. It'll basically fill most of that bin with approximately 3 yards of compost. Will sit there and age out, covered until early February, and then that 3 yards will be available to use in the garden. So it's not our full complement because we started this process kind of later in the year, but it'll give us at least 3 yards to take care of the vegetable garden, and then use some of the extra for extracts for watering and things of that nature. Ultimately, what we're going to have is approximately a 5-bin system with 2 bins aging out, and then 3 bins basically moving the material and filling at various times.
Where are you putting the 5th one?
Okay,
in between over
kind of
there?
come up back this way. It's a little messy, but when you take a look at it, we'll have 3 bins here, and then we're going to build 2 more bins up the uphill part, and those will be used for, like I said, the whole process of moving to the next bin, or when it's totally finished off, we'll try to accumulate our finished compost enough to fill a bin and leave it there, so that the oldest finishing bin will be used first. So it's always going to kind of be flowing through in that manner. So ultimately what I'm kind of thinking is at any point in time, I'm going to have this bin and that bin will be our finishing bins. Right now, this one's, taking care of the first round of composting, but ultimately the other 3 bins here will be the ones that we put the rough material in to begin the composting process. And then that just finishes over time. One of the things I thought about doing, which I think would also speed things up, is there'll still be some residual heat as this thing ages out, and such that it won't be freezing. And what I thought I would do is I would also add worms to it from our worm bin, just to kind of help give a little extra oomph to it, and let the composting worms kind of work on it a bit at the same time. So that should give us some really good compost that we can use in the garden. Quite the lecture, isn't it?
Yeah.
So all of this is being built with just recycled stuff that we have here on the farm.
And is filled with?
And is filled with biomass that's here on the farm. So if you have that ability to make that kind of biomass, a system like this would work pretty good. And that's one thing we've got a lot of biomass. It's either blackberries, brush, grass, all kinds of things. So we never seem to have a shortage of something to fill a bin with. And it looks like as fall is coming here, we're going to have a lot of leaves too.
Filbert
leaves, yeah. So, any thoughts?
No, I mean, do you put all of the kitchen stuff in here?
The kitchen stuff is still going through the bokashi bins, but yes, if I'm not putting the bokashi, say, directly buried in a double dig garden bed, you can put the bokashi into the thermal, as you're building these thermal basic composting bins that run on an aerobic basis. It'll take that material and it will actually just run it through its composting process, and it'll be fine. I've actually added 1 bucket of bokashi in here just to see how it's going, and I mean, like I said, this bin here is at 145 to 150, so it's heating up nicely, and it's right in the center of the bin, so it'll work in that. And that's another way of using bokashi. You can either if you can't build a compost bin and you can't bury it in your garden, you can always make a soil factory, and we did a video on that. Or you can bury it directly in your garden if you can get away, with doing that. Or just run it through the composting system, and that works fine. That also holds true for if you have the leachate from the bokashi. What do I do with it? You can also add it to an actively, working compost pile. Just spread the bokashi leachate around, water it in good, and you'll get no smells or anything of that nature, and it'll work fine. By the way, since you're out here, do you smell anything?
Nope.
Nope. And these guys are working away. There's no manure added to these particular piles. This composting system is not using animal manure, but it doesn't mean you can't. If you have rabbits or you have
We just
chickens,
don't have any.
yeah, we just don't have any livestock that we would add manure to it. So anyway, folks, I just kind of wanted to share with you the system of what we're trying to do to generate more compost. I know this is kind of a long, boring lecture, so I'm pretty good at that. So I want to thank you for staying with it all the way through. If you didn't, but anyway, thank you for watching us, and we'll catch you on the next video. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.